Hey everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Sean Adams, and Sean and I are going to talk about intrapreneurs, whatever that is. It kind of sounds like an entrepreneur, but kind of different. Well, maybe it's the same. I don't know. We'll find out from Sean. Sean, where can people find you?
First off, thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to be here. I would say the easiest place to find me would be on LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm posting the majority of my content, everything business focused, and we can connect and talk further on that site. It's usually the best spot.
Thanks, Sean. And you've got like a photo with is it a pink background on that? So you kind of stand out, don't you?
Yeah, you can see a guy with really pale Irish skin and then an even darker, maybe contrasting pink color in the background. So I'm hard to miss.
So just give us a brief overview about what you do, Sean, because you work for a relatively small organization, don't you?
I do. Yeah, we work for a small startup called iorad. It's actually an interactive tutorial builder, helping people build training and enablement guides for any kind of digital process that they have in their company. I actually head up the sales and partnerships team there. So essentially all of our go-to-market functions for our customers and partners who resell us or integrate with us. So my focus is really on trying to grow the brand, evangelize the concept of documentation and training, how important enablement is for organizations, and how our tool can help folks save time in creation, but more importantly, improve the learner experience as well.
So we often hear about the term entrepreneur, but what's an intrapreneur?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of rudimentary definition is really just somebody who has the same qualities of an entrepreneur. So someone who likes to create, to build, to really make something that they don't see in the world, but they just don't happen to own the organization that they work for. So they aren't the sole CEO or founder. They're basically working internally within a larger organization, but they're taking that same level of freedom and entrepreneurial drive just within an existing organization.
I know that in many organizations there may be some sort of job description, but quite often what we have to do when we go into organizations is actually there's a job description and then there's what we do, and they can be kind of different things. I know in your organization you can be doing multiple things as well as saying you're in sales. You could, if a lorry turned up with office furniture, you'd probably help unload the lorry and get the office furniture into the office. So there's multiple things that you can do. So how do you know what you're doing is the right thing for the organization?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think in the startup world, it's an easy one to use as an example because the job description is sort of a ambiguous couple of bullets that helps like keep us on track to understand maybe generally the department, if you can call it, that you're focusing in. But outside of that, in a startup, it's the old saying of like wearing a lot of hats. The idea is just you don't have resources and headcount for every single process in the company. So there needs to be this blending of roles and what you focus on or what you may take on, even though it's not specifically defined or like very clear in your written description or compensation package, what have you. And so like I always use the like gut test, which is like, is this the right thing to do for the customer? And then secondly, is it the right thing to do for the overall brand? And I know that seems like really simple and basic, but often if it's a customer facing issue, task, activity, and you're thinking like, what is going to be the best experience for them? Often you will make decisions and do things that are in their best interest, but not necessarily something that is a direct result of what you would be maybe compensated for or, really measured on, right? So for example, in a small organization like ours, I'm really there to drive revenue, to land new accounts, to help our partners sell and grow, the expansiveness of our company. However, one of the things I'll do is just help with like some of our marketing content or some of our customer insights. So someone who's already paying for us and happy, I'm reaching out to them just to learn more about their role, what makes them happy, what areas could we improve. That's not really in my role. That's not really something that I would be particularly compensated on, but that's like the correct thing to do for the customer because it's been 60 or 90 days since anyone's talked to them. why not reach out and learn more and just be that friendly face? Because some of my colleagues may be preoccupied, or they can't or haven't done anything like that before. And I know that's the right thing to do for the customer. In the long term, it's the right thing to do for the brand, because we end up finding expansion revenue. They give referrals. They just like being treated with that level of respect, and that we're being proactive. And that proactive word would be a really big one that I think would be a good theme for this conversation. You're kind of doing things that are not asked of you. And that's where, you'll see the biggest results, but it's often much more in the long term versus the short term.
I know that I was going to bring this in later on, but your CEO, who we've interviewed on our podcast, The Digital Download, he described something as non-asked outputs, which were where people just go and do good stuff and then come back and say, I did this. This was the output. And they go, wow, thanks for doing that. That's really good, So what, in terms of how do you see non-asked outputs working with you? Because that must be part of being an entrepreneur, doing things that aren't necessarily on your, in your job description.
And it coincides with the idea of like, oh, that's not my job, so I don't do it, right? And this is not for everybody, but it's just the high performers, the ones who are demanding the larger incomes and the growth trajectory in their career. They're getting creative with how they position themselves and the value that they have to make themselves irreplaceable. So, like a rudimentary example, let's say that you're going through your day-to-day job, and if I'm a salesperson, I find a piece of friction in our process. Maybe there's like a handoff issue between when I close a deal and when I hand it to customer success or support. And there's not a good email template, and it's like clunky, and something's not working there. Most employees would just ping their manager and say, this doesn't work. Please advise. Or like, what do you want to do about this? Or just like tell them it's broken. That doesn't really add any value. That just puts the problem on somebody else. And so the non-asked output idea would be like, okay, well, you just take action proactively, and you just go, listen, I wrote up this template. Here are the 3 things that I've found that are really helpful and that I would care about if I was them, and what I'm hearing from my side. No idea if this is like not on brand or if there's tweaks that need to be made, but here's what I put together. And it's that subtle reach and the just willingness to do something that you didn't have to be told about, so you weren't asked to do it. That's actually what people admire, and it's a very attractive quality, because it means you're trying to get stuff done and be proactive versus just the sitting back waiting for people to come to you with all the solutions. And those are the people that really people get attracted to, that they want to hold on to, that they get paid the most. Like, that is a quality that will really, really grow and help you just be one of those like key employees moving forward.
One of the things that I liked when you described that is not just the fact that you did something, because as a leader, I'm a great believer in, don't give me problems, give me solutions. You're the person that's doing this day to day. Therefore, you're the person that's actually going to come up with a better solution, better than I can. But what you've also did in that was that you basically asked someone for consensus. So you did this is kind of what I think it should look like. What would you like in it? And in a way, what you're doing is that you're co-creating to make the process better.
That's a really good point, Tim. And I think if you really distill down people who are upset or feel unheard by their management, it's because they feel like decisions are being made in a silo outside of themselves, even though they're the ones who have to take the brunt of that work and hear the problems from the customer or from the other team members or whoever's managing those projects. And it's that feeling of like not having a seat at the table that's really upsetting for most employees. And so one of the ways to grab a seat or demand a seat is to be proactive by suggesting that. Now it feels like we are actually brainstorming and creating things together versus these things being made in the dark and then just being forced upon you. And that's a really big differentiator there.
And for me, that's quite often individual contributors, whether you have individuals reporting to you or not, there's an element of leadership. And for me, that's the leadership, which is that proactivity, the the non-asked outputs, which is where people say, I went away and did this, and you go, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's spot on. And the same thing works in the individual contributor role, like in a business development, sales role, something like that. You're sending the email to the prospect and you're saying, hey, Tim, we have this really amazing new widget that's going to change your whole world. It's a magic wand. Here's my calendar link. Why don't you go ahead and book and I'll tell you all about it, right?
Yeah.
What part of that proactively solves a problem? What you did is just put all the work on the prospect to read about you, figure out how you're applicable, book the call. Like, you're putting all that work on the other person. It's the same thing. Versus the proactivity or the non-asked output is like, hey, Tim, I was on your website. I noticed a couple of quick things here. Not sure if it's relevant, but we have this other customer. They were successful in this way. Here's a program we built. I took a couple of your posts and I repurposed them into an example like this. Not sure if it's relevant or not, but if any of this catches your attention, open to a quick conversation. Like, that is a wildly different set of copy. One shows that you actually gave a crap and tried, even if it's completely off base and wrong. It's the reach that matters, and the fact that you are willing to get creative, personalize, and show a little bit of value before you actually had an ask or like a call to action from them.
Yeah, Seth Godin said, I don't have time to sort out your marketing problems.
Yeah. I mean, it's spot on. That's a huge piece of the sales thing of you are just offloading that problem on the other person, and the exact same thing happens in sales all the time.
So intrapreneurs and non-asked outputs, where do what do we have to do to make sure we have a culture that supports this? What's the leadership like?
Yeah, I mean, the bigger the company, the harder this usually seems to be, just because of process and red tape and bureaucracy and all these sort of things. But I think it's really about the level of autonomy and freedom you can create, or that environment in which you can elicit feedback and respond quicker. So if there's environments where you can have that weekly meeting and it's not just like a laundry list of like what was accomplished, that very much could have been an email, but much more of like, here's what we're working on. Here's a couple things we've stood up as our solution to this. Let's talk through them. And that is eliciting people to go, yeah, listen, I bump up against that problem every day. And Mary and Susan are not going to like that. So I think what will be more impactful is this, and this, just my 2 cents. Like, that ability to provide feedback in that, like, the safe environment, I think, is a big piece. So that would be one of the culture pieces that I think is really impactful. And also making sure that there aren't overly stringent guidelines on like acceptable things such as copy or projects or outreach, things like this. This is when it really starts to feel constricting for the employees, when you don't have like the autonomy to craft your own email or craft something outside of like the playbook that sales management has put down. It's a slippery slope, right? If you have green sellers, you can't just have them creating whatever the hell they want, because that's going to be a disaster. But you create this environment where you go, listen, here's the type of feedback we're looking to get from our prospects. We know that they're busy. We know that they don't know who we are, and we don't want to put extra work on them. So here's a way in which the type of research you could do. And I think that if you, especially from the sales perspective, can really spend the most amount of time focusing on what really good outreach, really good discovery, really good closing practices in real environments, like shadowing calls, doing coaching for when a deal was successful from prospecting all the way to closure. You're showcasing how they got creative. And I can almost guarantee there was a lot of creativity that went into closing that deal. So the younger reps can start to hear that there's like thresholds and a spectrum for the level of their own personality they can put on things. And I think that that's a really nice culture fit, because you're not saying like, have at it, go do whatever, but you're also not saying you need to use this sentence. So that spectrum, like, you can stay within that and give them flexibility, but show them really good examples. It helps people figure out how to sort of craft that in their own personality.
And I think that I understand in your organization, you run trials or pilots on things.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. The proof of concept is a
proof of concept.
Yeah, that's a really big sort of guide that we use for everything. And it goes along with that, which is most of the time when we're in this like prospect vendor type of conversation, there's this like, I'm going to try to get you interested, but I'm not going to give you anything of value until you give me your time. And then I'll give you a little bit of nugget of a little bit of a demo. And then when you're interested in that, I'll give you a little bit more. And then you're going to give me money. And then I'll give you actual value, which is like an ass backwards way to work with people. Like you would never do that with a friend or a colleague or a family member. Like you would always just help them with everything and know that it was going to work out, because it always does. And that is the way that it should be operated. And so the proof of concept is really this idea of like, how can I get them involved in using and playing around? So we'll do things like templates or connections. Like if I know a prospect or a colleague is struggling with something or looking for a job, I will go through my network and figure out exactly who they would want to meet. And I'll just introduce them to that person. I don't just sit in the back and go, let me know how I can be helpful. Right? You go, no, I'm just going to make a guess that I think that a few of these people might be helpful. Here's like, that's the proof of concept of like, here's just a few people, give that a try. Let me know how that works. Same thing with a prospect, right? You might not have a trial of your software or your product or what have you, but how can you get it in their hands? Is there like a case study, or is there a simulation? Is there a webinar you can run with an existing customer and really dive into the use case? Like they were here, they started using us at this point and got this value, and then where they are now, and this is all the things they've been able to check off because of working with us. And like that feels like something tangible that audience member can feel and try to solve or apply themselves. And that's the thing that's just like this holding back of value. That's a huge issue. So I'm a big proponent of trying to get that proof of concept and elicit that experience from our counterpart.
So where can this entrepreneurial spirit go wrong?
Well, there are those that are like certifiably unemployable, right? So like there's a fine line. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs out there would consider themselves unemployable.
Yeah.
So, there's a difference, I think, between like, I want autonomy in being able to build something and be a part of something versus like, I don't want a boss. And I made this mistake early on. I've owned like 3 different small businesses in my life. And early when I was very immature, it was very much, I don't want a boss. I didn't really know why I didn't want a boss, but something conditioned me to realize I don't want that like person lurking over me. And it wasn't until I got into organizations to realize that there was like levels within this that could let me still have that autonomy. But those that are looking at this very egotistically, like I need to have the CEO title or the founder title in order to make an impact, that's where it can really get askew, because people will start up a business just to feed their own ego and then not realize that by building a business, you're not doing the thing that you like. You're not the E-Myth, right? You're not the baker who owns a bakery. You're a business owner who's dealing with taxes and cleaning and vendors and all this other stuff that's running a business. And 12% of your time is spent actually baking stuff, right? And like, that's a huge issue that a lot of people will do, is they'll just escape organizations to be entrepreneurial and then realize that it's nothing like they thought it was going to be. And on the flip side of that, I think there are people who really like structure and they don't want to make decisions. And I think the big piece here is like, you don't need to be entrepreneurial. If you like to have like a very laid out plan, you're much more like a worker bee. I want to show up. I want to know exactly what I need to do. I want to plug in, do my thing and leave. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's been like fetishized that if you're not doing a side hustle and you're not also selling real estate on your spare time, that you're like this loser who's not going to do anything. That's completely insane. Some people are more entrepreneurial, or they can scratch that entrepreneurial itch within an organization. But if you don't have that, it's okay. And many organizations need people to be able to just sit down and do a specific role and clock out at 5 p.m. and be happy. And so I think it goes wrong with trying to apply this to all people in all situations.
It's not a cookie cutter, is it? It all depends on the individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sean, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight on what an intrapreneur is. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Yeah, LinkedIn would be the best place. It's just Sean Adams there. I try to put some posts out every day on different topics here, and we share and try to help our community as much as possible. So this was great, Tim. Glad we could join, and hopefully this was helpful for some people.
Well, I hope so too. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on and sharing your expertise and your experience. And we'll catch up soon, I'm sure.
Sounds great. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.